Hello, how's your day been? Good? Well, now it's time for a story. So all you have to do is sit back, relax, and listen. You ready? Okay, here we go. Today's story is A Little Red Riding Hood. There was once a little girl whose father and mother loved her so very much they thought that nothing was too good for her. Her mother made her the prettiest little dresses, her tights were the nicest you could buy, and she had bright, shiny buckles on her shoes. Her mother also made her a little cloak and a hood of red cloth. The little girl looked so pretty in them that her mother called her Little Red Riding Hood instead of Mary, which was her real name. Little Red Riding Hood had a grandmother who was so old that sometimes she lay in bed all day as she felt too weak to get up. One day the mother called the little girl and said, "Darling, I have put some milk, butter, some fresh eggs and bread in this basket for you to take to your grandmother. Run along quickly, do not dawdle, and do not stop to talk to anyone along the way. You need to hurry, as I want you to be back before it starts getting dark." "Yes, Mummy," said the little girl, and she took the basket and set off for her grandmother's house. At first she ran along quickly and stopped for nothing, but the fields were full of pretty flowers. "I'm sure," thought Little Red Riding Hood, "that my grandmother would love to have a bunch of these pretty flowers." So she began to pick one here and one there and another one there, until she had quite a handful. Then, all of a sudden, she heard feet stepping along the path, and an old grey wolf came trotting by. "Good day, Red Riding Hood," said the wolf. "Good day," answered the child. "And where are you going on this fine, bright, sunny day with your basket on your arm?" "Oh, I'm going to my grandmother's house. She is so old that sometimes she lies in bed and cannot get up, and I'm taking her some butter, some milk, some fresh eggs, and some bread." "And where does your grandmother live?" "She lives over beyond the wood in a little white house with a thatched roof and green blinds, and the path runs straight there." The wolf had now learned all he needed to know, so he said goodbye to the Little Red Riding Hood and trotted off quickly. As soon as he was in the wood, where Little Red Riding Hood could not see him, he began to run. On and on he galloped as fast as he could, for he wanted to get to the little white house with the thatched roof and the green blinds before Little Red Riding Hood did. In the middle of the wood, a woodcutter was busy at work. He saw the old grey wolf go hurrying by, and he wondered what he was up to. "He's up to some mischief, that's for sure," thought the woodcutter. So he flung his axe over his shoulder and followed the wolf to see what he was up to. On went Mr. Wolf. Soon he came to the edge of the wood, and there stood the little white house with the thatched roof and green blinds, and the path led straight up to the door, just as Little Red Riding Hood had said. So he knew that must be where her grandmother lived. He stopped and looked all about him. He didn't want anyone to see him. He saw no one, however, for the woodchopper had hidden behind some rocks. Then the wolf knocked at the door. Rat-a-tap-tap! Nobody answered. So he knocked again. Rap-a-tap-tap! Still no one answered. The wolf put his ear to the door and listened carefully. There was not a sound of anyone moving about inside. So the wolf turned the doorknob. It wasn't locked. So he pushed the door open and slipped inside. He looked about, and there was nobody there, for the old grandmother had been feeling much better that day, so she dressed and had gone out to visit a friend. The old wolf hunted about until he found the grandmother's nightie. Then he pulled it on over his big, hairy body. He tied on the nightcap that she wore to bed to keep her hair from getting messy, and put her glasses on his nose. And then he crawled into bed and pulled the covers up under his chin. The woodcutter outside wondered what the wolf was doing in the house, but he did not hear a sound, so he sat down to watch and see what would happen next. But he was very tired, so he fell asleep. It was not long before Little Red Riding Hood came running along. She was in a great hurry, for she took too long picking flowers. The woodcutter did not see her, however, for he was still asleep. The little girl ran up to the door and knocked upon it. Rap-a-tap-tap! Then the old wolf made his voice very quiet and weak to sound like her grandmother's. "Who's there?" he asked. "It's me, Grandma, Little Red Riding Hood," she said. "Oh, what a lovely surprise. Come in, my dear, the door's unlocked," said the wolf. Little Red Riding Hood turned the doorknob, pushed the door open, and went in. There was not much light in the room, for the wolf had pulled the curtains across the window, so Little Red Riding Hood could not see very clearly. "I'm not able to get up, dear child," said the wolf, still in the same weak voice. "Put your basket on the table and come closer." Red Riding Hood did as she was told. She put the basket on the table and came over to the bedside. But as she came closer, she thought her grandmother looked very strange. "Oh, Grandmother, what great big eyes you have," she said. "All the better to see you with, my dear," answered the wolf. "But oh, Grandmother, what long, long ears you have." "All the better to hear you with, my dear." "But Grandmother, what big, sharp, white teeth you have." "All the better to eat you with," howled the wolf, and he sprang out of bed and caught Red Riding Hood by her cloak. The little girl cried out, but then the woodcutter burst open the door and rushed in. The wolf's howl had woken him from his sleep, and just in time he hit the wolf so hard on the head that it fell down dead. Then he took Little Red Riding Hood up to his arms and cuddled her, for she couldn't stop crying. She was frightened, and her pretty red cloak had been torn. He wiped her eyes and promised to walk home with her, but first, he said, they must wait until her grandmother came home. When she came at last and heard the story and saw the wolf lying there on the floor, she could not thank the woodcutter enough. And indeed, if it had not been for him, the little girl would certainly have been eaten by the big bad wolf. From that day on, Red Riding Hood was careful to do what her mother told her, and when she was given jobs to do, she did them as quickly as she could. Little Red Riding Hood was very lucky, wasn't she? Thank goodness for the woodcutter. That's all we have for you today. I hope you've had fun. We'll see you soon. Bye.